There's this prevailing thinking that the White Sox are a small market team operating in a large market, and that small minded perception must stop.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Todd Welter, and welcome to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm a lifelong Sox fan and been podcasting here for over 2 seasons, and I've also covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And on today's show, all 3 segments are dedicated to your mailbag questions and comments. I'll get to some of your favorite all-time players after I tackle some questions about what to do in the outfield. But first, I want to go over some comments that try to keep painting the White Sox as this small market team that operates in a large market, franchise that can't change their stars, and it is that thinking that has to be overcome. All right, so I saw a few comments from Friday's show trying to point out how the White Sox are not a large market team because they only draw from the South Side, and they've never had more than 3 million fans go through the turnstiles. They didn't get 3 million fans after winning the World Series in 2005, and therefore they can't operate like a large market team. Honestly, that is sort of the vibe that this owner has given off too. I mean, Jerry Reinsdorf threw out the perception that when he wanted public money to build him a new stadium in the South Loop on that vacant land known as the 78, that the fire came in like a boss and called dibs. But when he was trying to get that public money, he said, Bridgeport isn't posh enough to draw 3 million fans. Bridgeport, I can't operate out of. I can't field competitive teams by being in that, unsafe neighborhood on the South Side. Folks, they don't turn out because right field is in that unsafe neighborhood and it's not cool and it's not hip and I can't compete with the Cubs. And there is this thinking that the Cubs, they have the monopoly on the Chicago fan base and on and on and on and on. And it's just small-minded thinking, small-minded perception. Throw your hands up in the air. Nothing can be done. And if you keep clinging to that perception that nothing can ever change, then yes, the White Sox will continue to act like a small market team, even though they have Chicago in their name. And I think it is worth demanding that they act like an organization that plays in Chicago and that there is enough room for 2 successful baseball franchises and there is enough people to draw revenue from and that you can actually compete with the Cubs for attention and that there are enough businesses to get sponsorships from. And also, you can change the stars of the team by either building a new ballpark or actually developing the parking lots around right field. What a concept. And if you have an owner that acts like a steward, like what Justin Ishbia is envisioning when he eventually takes over the team, maybe you do become this giant who's woken up from this long slumber. Because the White Sox have been referred to in the past. I know AJ Pierzynski on his Foul Territory podcast has always said, the White Sox are a sleeping giant of our organization. And that is why I want to kick off the Tuesday mailbag with some of these comments. And I want to start, this was left on TikTok by Micah Alange 975. I've got the screenshot for those watching on YouTube. He left this on the TikTok channel. I've been a Sox fan for over 50 years, and respectively, I disagree with you. The Sox are not a large market team. Yes, they play in Chicago, but their market is the South Side. The North Side doesn't support the Sox. We are a small market team. And then the funny thing is when I pointed out that the Sox do draw from the South suburbs, and there are heat maps out there, you can Google it, that show the fan base. Yes, there's a lot of blue in the Chicagoland area, but there is that chunk of black that the White Sox do dominate. And it's not just the South Side of Chicago. It goes into the South suburbs. He said, well, I'm from there, and I know way more Cubs fans there. Well, then maybe you just know a few people, and there happen to be Cubs fans. I grew up in McHenry County. I was one of the few Sox fans that my friends knew. Okay. But to me, I'll just say this, and I put that as a response. First, we got to stop acting like the Cubs have a monopoly on Chicago baseball. Okay, and this isn't meant to throw shade at the Cubs, and I know some Cubs fans are going to come across here and try to make stupid arguments. Again, this is a show dedicated to White Sox fans, so we're talking White Sox business. But yes, sometimes the Cubs trickle in, and I'm not trying to throw hate at the Cubs, but we got to stop acting like they have this monopoly. They're not on WGN anymore. Okay? They're on cable, just like the White Sox. Marquee is struggling just as much as CHSN is struggling. They are losing money, both. Okay? What the Cubs do have, though, that outshines the White Sox is they have the hip neighborhood of Wrigleyville. They've got the historic ballpark. They also have like a budding superstar and Peter Crow Armstrong. PCA, he's hanging out with Caleb Williams. They kind of got the hip vibe. They're also winning. So again, I'm not trying to slam them, but they've also been more successful over the past 25 years than the White Sox. And you know how you actually then can counter that? How you can compete with the Cubs? Create your own neighborhood, whether it is a new stadium or developing around right field. And also, you really got to break this stereotype that Bridgeport is unsafe. And I know someone's going to leave the comments that, it's a war zone. It's not. It's actually becoming a bougie area. Why not tap into that? And also, how about build up your own talented young players who can be superstars like Close Montgomery? Get those guys out and about in Chicago. And then how about you build a winner? Because let's stop acting like the White Sox are the Bridgeport White Sox, and they can also, or the Southside Sox, even though they, embrace Southside. But again, the Cubs alternate Wrigleyville. It's just one of the things. But let's stop acting like that's all they draw from, or that they should be drawing from. And even then, it's a population of like 250,000. So it would be a smaller market. It would be the smallest market, but they can draw from more. They are the Chicago White Sox. And if they start acting like they are a team that can draw sponsors from a major metropolitan area and fans, even if you only draw 2.9 million fans, you can make a lot of money to support a competitive payroll. The Braves drew 2.9 million fans and made $46 million in profit. They had $600 million in baseball revenue. They built more than a stadium. They built a district. And whenever Justin Ishbia takes over, he's got to break this stereotype. And this was slanted left. He left this on the TikTok channel. Jerry said it. Package a good team enough to be considered a contender, but not necessarily get to the playoffs, and the fans will come. He also disdains long contracts unless it's at the front end, then sell them off as they hit their prime. Frank Thomas was underpaid his entire White Sox career. I almost believe they open purse strings, sort of, for average players that don't produce on purpose. Benintendi, Adam Dunn come to mind. Yeah, obviously start targeting a better class of free agent to put you over the top, and not like a limited, never was a star in Benintendi, or say a 3 true outcome hitter like Adam Dunn. But also, can we stop focusing on the Cubs beating the White Sox in attendance? This is what at 13 Alejandre left on the YouTube comments. None of those players will come here till we build a solid base and are able to win. Everyone forgets that after winning the World Series, Reinsdorf paid every starting pitcher in the rotation $10 million per year, which was a lot of the time for SP. The Cubs still easily beat us in attendance in 05 and 06. First of all, he didn't pay every pitcher in that rotation $10 million. At one point, John Garland did get $10 million, but no, he didn't pay every pitcher $10 million. But anyways, here's why I don't care about what the Cubs draw. They have an historical ballpark. You're going to get tourists going there as well, other than just the hardcore fans. It's a landmark. Plus, they don't have to battle an out-of-date and also something that their fan base keeps feeding, and that is the stereotype of playing in a rough neighborhood. Like I've said before, and I know it was early morning on a Sunday, but before the final game of the year, when I went down, I drove around Bridgeport, and guess what? It was fine. No gunshots. I saw an area that is, a few blocks away, has a coffee shops. They got some bars. There were people out and about on the neighborhood. You got people going to the church by the ballpark. I stopped at the Mobile on Pershing to use the bathroom. No one stole my car. No one gave me a hard time. I've stopped there a few times to get gas and use the facilities while I was there. It's surrounded by parking lots. One of the things that Reinsdorf did a bad job of was when he built New Comiskey, he ripped out like McCuddy's. And he went for the parking lot revenue rather than creating Comiskeyville to have an added draw. But that can be fixed, whether it's a new ballpark or developing some parking lots. Well, let's dive into some more of your questions and comments. about what the team should do in the outfield, and that's coming up next. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode, and FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get on the action during every NFL playoff game. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boost gives you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. FanDuel's traditional money lines, spreads, and over-unders are always fun to play, but if you want to win some big-time money, play FanDuel's props, parlays, and futures. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, check out our new Everydayer Club. You get access to an ad-free audio feed of Locked On White Sox compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. You'll also get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. And I would love to talk White Sox baseball with you in the Discord chat, especially once the season starts, as we can discuss what is happening on game day, whether we love what's happening or loathing it. Go to lockedonwhitesox.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, so to me, what the White Sox need to do in the outfield, if they are going with a veteran, is look into who can still at least give, those last good ounces of baseball that they have left. Try to see what that projection is, and whoever's got that best projection, go with that guy. And that is sort of what the White Sox, I think, kind of are looking for, as I don't think, again, Harrison Bader's price is going to come down enough to be a bridge in right field. And there are a couple of suggestions that were, left in the comments or in the mailbag that I will say this, though, I don't think they're worth pursuing. And it doesn't mean that these suggestions are not, worth making. It's just, they just aren't what you think they're going to turn out. Like suggesting Jesse Winker from Everydayer Catholic Baseball 8. He writes, I think Jesse Winker would be the best move. He has the best clubhouse, presents okay average, good on-base percentage, and hits for power. Well, first of all, it would be interesting if they did sign Winker and he did make the opening day roster, because a rain of boos would be showered upon him on opening day in Milwaukee, because they hate him in Milwaukee for how things went when he was with the Brewers. But here's the thing. The problem with Winker is availability. And then if he is available, what type of production are you going to get? I mean, he's played in over 130 games just twice in his career. And for example, in 2022, he was terrible at the plate. 219 average, 688 OPS in 136 games. Now in 2024, when he played in 145 games, between the Nationals and Mets, he was much better. I mean, that was a nice bounce back after that dreadful 2023 season he had in Milwaukee, where he played in just 61 games. I believe he had knee and back issues. I mean, he tried to gut it, but he was terrible, even when he was in the lineup. But he does play 145 games, 253 average with the 764 OPS overall, though the numbers declined a bit when he went to New York. But then he played in just 26 games for the Mets in 2025. I mean, he's already had his career year. He went to an all-star team with Cincinnati, kind of tailed off, gets traded to the Mariners. There's questions about, was he happy there? Gets traded to the Brewers. Terrible there, hurt. So again, you get this sense of what would you be getting? And when you stack him up with Michael Conforto, the availability isn't an issue with Michael Conforto. So then you just have to wonder, can he bounce back? Where with Winker, it's both. Can he be available and bounce back? And can he be productive? So it's just, I don't think that is going to turn out the way it's being suggested. I don't think he's the proper solution if you stack him up with Michael Conforto, even though, again, Conforto had a terrible year for the Dodgers in 2025. Then there's a question about trying Lenyn Sosa in the outfield. This is from Doug Turngren, 5027. He left this on the YouTube page. Have the Sox ever tried Sosa in left field or right field? Just wondering if Sosa can play corner outfield. It would be nice to have his bat in the lineup every day. The answer is no. He has never played in the outfield, at least according to Baseball Reference, even in the minors or winter ball, where they track that as well. If you go to that, I did not see it. Maybe I overlooked it, but all I've ever seen is first base, third base, and second base, even in winter league ball. And honestly, I would not trust him out there because his defensive instincts are terrible. Okay? I mean, think about this. He struggled to find first base when fielding there this past season. He couldn't find first base sometimes. And now you want him tracking fly balls off the bat? I mean, what he is right now is this is what I would say his role is. He's the backup first baseman. He's the backup second baseman. I still think he could play a little bit of second because if you do position him correctly at second, he can at least make the routine plays. And then he's the backup DH. And you can say, how can the guy who led the team in batting average and home runs be the backup? Well, again, he might be just nothing more than a raised floor player. And again, I applaud Lenyn Sosa. You know, I don't want to come across as a hater because I actually appreciate, again, guys that fight for their careers and guys that, you know, for example, he actually keeps getting better every time you think you're done with him. As I said, I mean, he's passed beyond Godfather 3 player, but he was a raised floor player. You can upgrade. And they did upgrade at first base with Munetaka Murakami. And Chase Meidroth can at least maybe provide more, you know, value, at least overall, because he has the baseline of he can at least get on base, whether it's a walk or a hit. With Sosa, if he stops hitting or stops hitting for power, he's worthless. I'm sorry, he is. He's an old school. He's either got to hit for a good average, which he did for a little bit of the season, and then he had some power because he doesn't get on base and he's not very good defensively. But that doesn't mean he still can't be a, you know, maybe he's more, I would say, more of a super utility role for a hitter. Because I think if everything is calculated correctly, there still is at bats for him at least 5 days a week. Although finding that fifth day, that's going to be tricky. So at least there's at bats for him, I would say, in theory, 4 days a week. Finding that fifth day, it's going to be a tough path because you should look to give Meidroth a rest at least once a week. You know, because how much effort he exerts out there. I mean, that guy puts everything into the game. You want to give him a rest. And as we know, he had a little injury prone. More of it was just taking balls off his fingers and that type of stuff. But still, can't hurt to give him a rest. Munetaka, or you got to give Colson a rest too. And I'd rather have, you know, Meidroth, even though he doesn't have the best range, be the backup shortstop over, you know, Tanner Murray's more of a late inning guy if he's the guy that makes it. But Munetaka Murakami should be eased into the big leagues against lefties. So for argument's sake, let's say the White Sox are facing a southpaw once a week. There's a day there. So there's 2 days. And then Sosa should DH on the day you are giving Edgar Carroll a full day off and a day that you're giving Kyle Teal a full day off. So there's 4. Although they're probably going to give Andrew Benintendi some at-bats. DH, that's why I would much rather have Lenyn Sosa get those DH at-bats, you know? So, yeah, you have to find a day 5 because until he proves he can hit for a decent average or a decent slug, basically, he's just earned enough to be on the team again. That's, to me, the baseline. If he keeps hitting more home runs, again, if he gets to 30 home runs, then, yeah, you better find a spot for him. But if it's just he's going to provide decent slug, decent average, that's a guy that's maybe more of a super utility hitter. You know, I don't know. I just don't see him tracking the ball, you know, better in the outfield. And then you got everydayer Leslie Bro, 8880. He writes 100 times out of 100. I prefer Tauchman for this team. He's actually a better player at this point. Plus, because you don't want to play him every day, and he's completely fine with that. It gives the Sox some runway for younger options to get playing time while they still have a solid offensive and defensive support if players like Baldwin and Pereira struggle. And honestly, if he's fine with another $2 million deal and playing a backup role and being the mentor, I think that might be the best option. And think about this. The one thing that the White Sox do actually need is a veteran leader again, as you had two of those to guide the youngsters and Michael A. Taylor and Talkman. And now you got to fill that void. And you still need guys to say, here's how you go about your business. But I think the assessment has to come down to if Conforto can play a bit more than 93 games, you might want to entertain that option instead. So I think it should come down to those two. Well, let's dive into some of the comments about the all-time favorite team that I ran last Wednesday, as you everydayers had some other players to suggest and some reactions, and I want to address that next. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 sports podcast network. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. And if you haven't yet, sign up for the Everydayer Club. You can go to lockedonwhitesox.supercast.com. You get an ad-free audio podcast of the show and an invite to a members-only Discord chat where we can talk White Sox baseball. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever you get your audio podcasts, as we're on places such as Apple or Spotify. And make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com or on TapSportsNet.com. So I got an email from this guy, RBI Vids, that I think is a nice all-time favorite team. And then there are some other names that I think you guys made some good suggestions and comments in the comment section on. And one of you really didn't like Ozzy being on that list. And that is a hot take I do want to eventually share. So first, let's dive into this email I got from RBI Vibs. And by the way, always feel free to email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com with questions and comments. Or again, sign up for the Everydayer Club to join the exclusive Discord chat. Here's what he writes. Hey, Todd, love the show. First, Munetaka Murakami. Is it wrong to form hope that he will have a Jose Abreu-like season? Second, my list. Catcher, AJ Pierzynski. First base, Jose Abreu. Second base, Frank Eisbell. Shortstop, Ozzie Guillen. Third base, Joe Creedy. Left field, Scott Podsednik. Center fielder, Fielder Jones. I just finished When Chicago Ruled Baseball by Bernard Weisenberger. It's an amazing book. Right field, Magglio Ordóñez. My first game, he hit a walk-off home run in 2005. DH, Frank Thomas. And then his bench, Paul Konerko, Alexi Ramirez. Carlton Fisk, never saw him play. Was there when they put a statue up. You got Carlos Lee on the bench and Robin Ventura. And then you got Mark Burley, Chris Sale, John Garland, John Dakes, Nick Altrock as your starting pitchers. Relievers, Matt Thornton, Shingo Takatsu, Jose Contreras, Bobby Jenks, Nate Jones, and Keith Falk. So we got we got 6 relievers, 5 starters. That's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. If my math is correct, man, you left somebody off. You could have added somebody else. Anyways, first, nothing wrong with thinking Mooney can be like Abreu. I'm hoping for the same. I keep saying that he's got the potential to be this rebuild's version of what Jose Abreu was to the last rebuild. He's got the chance to be a franchise icon if he can make contact and he hit home runs like he did in Japan. And this is the key. And the organization signs him to an extension if he reaches those benchmarks. Because remember, he's betting on himself. He's only here for 2 years. Remember, Abreu signed, I believe, a 4-year deal, and then they re-signed him to another deal. Either way, they had a much longer commitment from Abreu than they do with Murakami. Second, I do love the names that you listed, man. You can never go wrong with Scotty Pods. It's just, again, he had 2005, and then 2006 was kind of shaky. That type of stuff. But, I mean, you can never forget what he did in 2005. And I remember I hated that trade. Hated it from the White Sox perspective. I remember being at the radio station I was working at in Milwaukee, and I was furious because, again, I kind of knew some things about Scott Podsednik behind the scenes after he struggled in 2004. And I was like, why do we want this guy here? That type of stuff. And it turned out to be a mutual beneficial deal for both parties. Keith Falk, he was another name I was thinking of putting on the list. Kind of hurt to see him then go and win a World Series with the Red Sox, but pretty neat that he did. Shingo, hey, there's nothing wrong with a one-hit wonder, because he was a fan favorite. I mean, he was so fun to watch because his slower and slowest was fun to watch him get outs, at least for that season in 2004. Never getting to see Carlton Fisk play, man. I'll just say this. I loved watching Pudge at the plate when I was a kid, because he was, again, one of my first favorites. And I loved how he would do this with his helmet. Everybody remembers when he would get up to the plate and then he'd kind of lumber into his stance and then boom, he would crack a deep one. And he also called a great game behind the plate. I always forget about how, sometimes we do forget about how great Alexi Ramirez was. That, yeah, he deserves some consideration at shortstop. But again, for me, I was always raised on those stories of Louis Aparicio and Nellie Fox and the Go-Go White Sox, where, those are kind of the guys that I would go with. But again, I think it can never hurt to go with Alexi Ramirez. All right, here is a hot take from Everydayer, John Detzman 6022, and he writes this when it came to my all-time favorite. Quite honestly, I think Magglio was one of the best outfielders for the Sox ever, although maybe he was also talking about the solutions with the right field. Either way, this is what he writes. And I got the screenshot up for those watching on YouTube. Quite honestly, I think Magglio was one of the best outfielders for the Sox ever. Shoeless Joe, obviously never saw, but read how incredible he was. I think Ozzie is overrated and that a well-trained chimp could have led that team. They all held each other together and picked each other up. The guy who was the backbone of 2005 was Aaron Rowan, and he was a relentless beast in the outfield. Yes, now it is, the team, the all-time favorite team. I mean, Aaron Rowan, again, it came down to why I didn't put him, first of all, on my team and because I liked Aaron Rowan, it's just the tenure wasn't long enough. I mean, Lance Johnson was there at the beginning of the 90s through at least a few seasons. I mean, he was a guy that even in the 80s. So that's kind of why I went with him. It's just more of the tenure. Rowan was great. I mean, yeah, he tracked down everything. It's one of the reasons why I get why we like Luis Robert Jr., some of you, because he will try to track down everything. And there is something to be said. And it was cool that, a center fielder should, not just run into the wall, he should taste it. And that's what he did, although he did get him hurt a few times. But there was a reason why I just didn't have Rowan down there. Now, I'm going to say this. I think Ozzie actually deserves a lot of credit for 2005 in that something had to change in how the team was playing if they were going to get by the Twins. And I think Ozzie advocating for kind of changing the style of the play, because in 2004, they were a true power team. And they were in 2003 and 2002. I mean, for the first 4 years, they were nothing but power with Mags, with Carlos Lee, Frank Thomas. They were trying, and Paul Konerko. They were trying to hit the ball over the fence and win with the long ball. And it was not beating the Twins. So they went with that more defense and running the bases well, that kind of offensive approach, that little just tweak. It was more of a tweak because they could still slug the ball. I mean, people forget that they did hit a lot of home runs in 05. And I'm always going to advocate the two best lineups that the White Sox have had, at least over the past, 45 years. 1993, a team Ozzie was on, and 2005. Even though, again, they still sometimes struggled to score runs, it was perfect for how you play at right field. It was the perfect blend of guys who could mash and contact hitters who could run the bases and then play defense that was supported by great pitching. And that is what plays to right field. And I hope this franchise gets back to that, because they either tend to at least hitting wise, they tend to go to one extreme or the other. They either want to hit a lot of power, but we've seen bad defense then, or it's to contact hitting, but again, no defense. The key is power, at least, like I've said, 4 to 5 of those power guys, 2 to 3, maybe I would say 3 contact on base guys who can run to keep that offense going when the home runs do have a drought, because that is one of the problems with power teams. You will go on home run droughts. And then most of them, practically all of them, you hope, are able to field, and then you have great pitching. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. I'll be back tomorrow with James Fox of FutureSox.net to break down the White Sox international free agent signing class, and also if it's worth prospect watching this season or to actually focus on the big league club. I hope you have a great day, and make sure you subscribe to Locked On White Sox on YouTube at Locked On White Sox, or follow or subscribe at wherever you get your audio podcast so you'll get all the latest episodes. The show is on places such as Apple or Spotify. You can follow the show on X, formerly Twitter, at Locked On Sox or at Todd J. Dub. You can also find the show on TikTok at Locked On White Sox. You can also email me your questions and comments to lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On White Sox ad-free, plus a members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonwhitesox.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure your second listen is Locked On MLB.